to the Executive Outlook. Today's guest is someone who has spent years working in data and AI, helping organizations make sense of their data, modernize their platforms, and build the right foundation for AI to work actually instead of hype. Chris is a data and AI leader with deep expertise across data governance, architecture, warehousing, and AI leadership. He is also one of the leading voices on what he calls the context layer, the critical piece that sits between data and AI and determines whether your AI system give you the right answers. Welcome to the Executive Outlook. Really glad to have you here with us today.
Thank you for the introduction, Isha. And yes, I feel very humbled with the details. I've been in the industry probably 30 odd years now, and started off back at Cognos in the 90s. Yeah, working on BI reporting back then. Yeah, lots changed, but lots hasn't changed as well. So a lot of the concepts are still the same, even though the technology has been evolving over those years. Yeah, so I suppose how did I get into this space? I suppose is the question. A little bit by fluke. My first ever job, after college, I wasn't actually studying. I was more studying on the business side, so I wasn't on the technical side. And saw what the tools could provide back then to give information to decision makers to make them more effective. And I think the first thing I ever built was a reporting on the finances for that particular company. And the finance director looked at it and said, "Oh, using our tools, but what data is that?" I said, "Our data as well." And he said, "Wow, they're actually using your own tools internally to make a difference." And that's where it all started, really. And the rest is history, I suppose. How did I get from there to here? I suppose is the journey. So I think having that business lens at the beginning and not that technical ones always helped me really understand why we were doing this. And as technologists, sometimes we get drawn down into the hype, as you mentioned earlier, creating cool stuff and doing things, but not actually being connected to what the business need and what's going to drive the right business outcomes. I think I've called it sometimes technology beauty pageants, where you just bring out the fastest pipeline in the world that delivers no value to anyone. So it's great, it delivers something really, really quickly, but what it delivered didn't actually satisfy what the business needed. And so from working, doing front-end reporting, BI reporting, as it was called then, which had the concept of a semantic layer, which we'll come back to in a bit when we talk about context layer. And you had to go and model a semantic layer, and Cognos has something called a catalog, and you put the business definitions and you put all those things in there. And I think over time we've lost that connection to the business. Well, the big data bubble, I think, was one of the elements of that, where everyone thought you can just put data into a big data lake and at some stage you'll be able to make some sense out of it. And we forgot how to data model at that point, because the critical thing about getting good information out of it is not just having the data, but just having it modeled for the right purpose. And then not only modeled for the right purpose, having the right business layer put onto it as well, which semantic layers you still do provide that. But I think we've moved on a lot since then. But having a good idea and getting it into production is a different mentality and a different discipline, I think, is needed. Governance is always seemed to be a bit of a swear word, or people wanting to, oh no, governments are involved, they're going to slow us down. And I think they get bad press to some degree, because governance is there to help you get to production. And if you engage them sooner and actually understand why you're doing these things, and there's a good reason to have some structure and some processes in place. They may not all make sense to the engineer that's doing it, but there's a reason at a business level of why you need to do these. So let me break down what I call governance, because governance has got many different lenses to it, and there's a security aspect to it. So there is making sure that the data is classified correctly, and any sensitive data is either anonymized, obfuscated, or you've got the right controls around it. And that leads onto the security aspect as well, so making sure that only the right people have access to the data, and higher privilege access is not not perform key rotation, stuff like that. So it's things that if you know about it and you put that into your design up front, they're not a problem. So yeah, I encourage people to work closely with your governance team. They're not there to stop you getting your stuff into production. They're helping you make sure that when it goes to production, it's going to be safe and not have any regulatory issues or any data breaches that can have a significant effect on your organization. And then the other thing is well architecting your solution. So having a agreed integration and separation of activities and duty. So a lot of people always go down the route of, oh, I'm going to use this technology, and then you work out the features you're going to use that technology for, and it's the wrong way round. You know, you need to work out what you need to do and what's the right tool at the right time to perform that, which is yeah, the architecture skill that comes into it as well, which is not just drawing pretty boxes and nice picture, pretty pictures. It's making sure you've got the right meaning to each of those.
Yep.
So now we talked about having well-governed stuff, having well architectured designs, but you need to get meaning out of all this particular data. And I mentioned about semantic layers that were historically, bundled with ITIL, and they move forward now. And I think when I talk about context there, it's not a technology, it's not just one component, it's a blend of both. It's a blend of technology that can help deliver the information about the data that is being presented or published. With AI, there's a need even more to provide even more context to make sure that the questions you ask provide accurate answers. And we've all seen hallucinations, and when we're using ChatGPT, and at the beginning, unless you start looking into it with that human in the loop, you think, oh my God, look at this is brilliant. Look at it's written, knows all this stuff. And then you scratch below the surface, you realize not all of it is accurate. And, a way of ensuring that that's not happening when your team are using it internally on your internal data is making sure that you've got the right context layer that's going and the right governance around that that makes sure that the right questions are asked by with the right context and using the right information. And I suppose I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about when I talk about context. So the legal industry, for example, or the medical industry. There are, don't quote me exactly, but I think there's about 24,000 words in the English language, which I think 15,000 of them are represented by either medical or legal terms, maybe even higher than that. On average, we probably use 3,000 words on our everyday usage. So there's many of the words out there which are not commonly used in our everyday language, but are very relevant for anything that's going to be used for any legal or any medical research. So these can have, hundreds of thousands different data points that will actually point to the same meaning, how you've got it stored in your data. So you need to make sure that you provide an ontology, which is the description or the knowledge of all of these terms and how they're used, then pointing it down to your semantic layer, which is a representation of how your data has been physicalized. So it adds a whole new layer of information. I referred to in the past as metadata. So it's data about the data about your data. And that's where the value is now, because without that rich metadata that's describing all the information that you have in your business, you're going to ensure that you don't get these hallucinations. Everything is being validated and, using your model management as well to make sure that you're getting the right answers for the right questions.
So, how is the cataloging help
Mm.
in the metadata management and can avoid the hallucinations?
So your data catalog, your business glossary is one of those things that will go into that. So that's going to give the business descriptions that will help with your semantic layer descriptions and creation. Another one is your business processes, what you do, what data you use between each step of the process. That's another rich source of metadata that can link to your catalogs. One department could use a certain terminology for the same thing as another one, but knowing that business process is all joined up to different descriptions, but actually pointing to the same business rule for your net profit, for example, another calculation, unit costs or something like that, was factoring in all the right things. They may refer to it as different terms, but it's all calculated in the same way. Another source of that is obviously your DDL within your databases can have relationships in there. So foreign key, primary key constraints, also another thing that feed through into that context there because you're giving more meaning to the relationships of that data. Um, so they're more of the metadata. It's now how that data is managed. So you'll have knowledge graphs. You'll have things like Neo4j, so graph databases. So you'll have other technologies that are needed to support the amount of that metadata you've got. And you may not need them all straight away, and that's why I don't think a context layer is a product as such. I think it's more of a logical layer of your application. If anyone's out there selling context layers, I'm not supporting those vendors and all that. I'm talking very conceptually.
Hmm.
And I think you only need the right technology to support the right use case at the right time, but just knowing when's the right time to level up your capabilities.
Okay. And how do you think that when you have the context in place, then will the original problems that we are facing with the AI about the reliability will gonna fix?
One solution to fix it's going to help. And I think the human in the loop is the other aspect as well that's going to make sure that and the feedback loop aspect.
Mhm.
So we've all got jobs, we've also got a need. I think our purpose is going to be ensuring that our context is up to date and accurate. And as humans, we're the ones that really can verify it. And that's our role to help with the context management. So yeah, it's not you've also got to you can't just start with a context layer because you've got to sort out everything below it first of all. So it may help you manage how you solve some of those back end problems gradually, but you're going to need to address any of those issues you've got with your how your data is modeled in the first place. How your data is managed, quality checks, and has the associated monitoring in place, making sure that governance is in place, data sovereignty, where the data is allowed to be and how that data is allowed to be used. You've got to sort all these things out before you go and start thinking, I can just go and put a context layer on top of what I've got and I'm going to solve all the problems. You can probably solve some of those problems immediately with having that context there, but you're going to gradually have to build out and enhance and mature that logical layer over time to ensure it can satisfy all your business requirements accurately.
Got it. So, switching the gears to the modernization projects. So, what do you think why data modernization is needed right now for any organization? Why they should be thinking about the modernization of their infrastructure?
So I think you always something new going to come out. If you're always waiting till the next thing comes out, you're never going to progress. So you need to start now because the reason why your competitors will be starting now. And I think the other thing that people need to look out for is newer companies can come along. They can start much quicker now. They don't have any of the friction you may have in your organization because they can move quicker. They're smaller. They're nimble. They haven't got the technical debt that maybe you have as well. So unless you start getting ahead of the game now, your competitors are going to catch up very, very quickly. So, and also, there's some operational savings and benefit you can get from this. You'll be able to get more throughput from the team you've got. I'm not talking about using this to reduce headcounts. It's use your people in a better way. Look to see what both business processes can be optimized quickly and start with that. Start small and then grow big. So the best time to plant a tree was 15 years ago. The next best time is today. So yes, start growing your AI strategy out now before it's too late.
So, when a company is looking for a modernization project, what are the first few steps the company should consider so that that project should not fail? It should be a successful project.
Um, I think it's working out where you'll be able to succeed. So if you start looking for the nicest, best use cases out there, the shiniest ones, they're probably going to be the more difficult ones. So identifying use cases that are easy to measure of with the benefits from them, quick to deliver, de-risk it. Get something out there that's quick and easy, but also that you can build on top of. So find something that okay, if I build this, it enables these other things to happen at a later date. So look to see where data assets or components, architectural assets of your platform that can help with other use cases or other departments afterwards.
Right. So it can save a lot of efforts as well as we can be faster in execution of our projects if we can reuse assets.
Exactly, because sometimes you need a lot of foundations or a lot of components to deliver the bigger use cases, but it's like that building blocks. You build the first layers that can unlock the first bit of value. You've got the stakeholder buy-in, you go to the next level. So you can actually build on top and get that tower, your AI tower, and get the best use case will be sitting on the top, but you'll have to work your way up there.
So you have worked with many companies on many projects, right? So what is the pain point you solve for your if I talk about the companies, your customers, as you will be working on the projects for them?
So I think the biggest challenge is not the technology, it's the people and processes. And if you get to understand the objectives of performing something, it's much easier to take people on the journey. So I think that's the biggest challenge is getting organizations to change how they operate to work better with technology. And the gap between the business and technology has been uh, we don't always talk the same language. And I think getting a business and the tech teams working closer together, this is a good example of that, is find that initial small use case where you can demonstrate to the business that by working closer together, you can get better outcomes.
Right. So if the processes is in place, most of the strategy is there already. It just comes the execution of it. So
You need to have the right strategy as well, the right use cases. But yeah, it's working in harmony, two sides of the business working together.
what has been the valuable lessons you have learned from a project that didn't go as planned?
I'll go back to the governance example as well. Is I think I even fell foul of this, or as many people have, is engaging governance too late in the game can actually really slow you down. Something that's where I made the statement earlier, engaging them earlier because they're there to help. And I think if you leave things too late and don't build governance and security as part of your design at the early stage, it can slow you down later. Engage early is my advice with governance and security teams. So and they're your friends and they'll make your life easier if you engage them earlier.
So, what has been the impact when you have put governance onto the project and how the business has actually benefited from that?
Yeah, I think faster release to production was the result of it really. So embedding the policies into the design process meant that by the time we got to do the release, governments are already signed it off. They're already aware of what's going on. And some of the companies have like architecture review boards or PMO functions where you need to verify that everything's done before things go to production. That became just a tick box exercise. It was no longer a long exercise of many meetings and emails backwards and forwards to get an agreement on something that if we'd engaged earlier, we wouldn't have had that problem.
Right. What does good AI leadership actually look for, and where the most of the leaders get wrong when they want to do the AI adoption?
Most leaders get it wrong where they want to use the most, they go for the shiniest use case. So something that is probably quite challenging. Choosing a challenging one it's achievable, yeah, but the time it takes to actually get to that, you'll either lose the faith of the stakeholders because they're waiting too long to get the things you promised, or you run out of budget and you don't actually ever get there. So the advice I touched on this earlier is start small, work to big, but know your moonshot, know where you want to get to, but don't go for the moonshot straight away. Just be happy you're going in the right direction and do things in a more iterative way, and start with the foundations. But you can do these things in parallel. So you can do some small proof of value, should we call it, rather than a POC that is actually evidencing what can be achieved. At the same time, addressing those foundations that can be used for future projects.
Really great insights, and I have learned a lot from your real world experiences that you have shared. in different areas. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me on here. It's been a pleasure chatting about these things. So I hope you and the audience found something useful at least.
Thank you. And it's such a pleasure having you on the Executive Outlook. Thank
Thank you
you.
very much. Thank you.